Coming up on Phillies Nation, presented by BQ Basement Systems, Pat and Corey discuss a major trade and how it affects the Phillies' plans. Jason Stark gives us his take on a pitcher who could be dealt and one we wish we kept. Matt Stairs gives us hitting tips, Tommy Green gives us pitching tips, and I've got the batter's inbox questions. That's next on Phillies Nation.
Welcome in. This is Phillies Nation. He is Corey Simon. I am Pat Gallen. We are brought to you by BQ Basement Systems, and we're here at the beautiful Fieldhouse Sports and Beer Hall in Center City, Philadelphia. Well, another ugly week for the Phillies. They were swept over the weekend by the Pittsburgh Pirates, and that'll pretty much do it. I think that pushes them pretty far out of contention in the National League East. And during the weekend series and during the last week, it was just ugly, ugly baseball. They can't score any runs. Outscored 31-11 over the last week through Sunday. Over the last month, the Phillies have the third lowest OPS in the major leagues. It's just not a fun time right now.
And that doesn't surprise you. It's not even just over the last month. Over the entire season, the Phillies have, I think, the fourth worst OPS in all of baseball. Since that 5-game winning streak, the Phillies have lost 13 of 16 games. They've averaged 2.6 runs per game. The offense has been non-existent. People like to throw out that word inconsistent. It's not inconsistent. This Phillies offense is consistently lousy, and you are what you are at this point in the year. This is worse than it was leading into the All-Star break in each of the last two seasons. The Phillies could legitimately be 18 to 20 games under 500 at the break, unless they have a couple wins in this final 7-game stretch.
Right, we'll see what happens, but it doesn't look good. So now we basically turn our focus to the trade deadline and what will happen with the Philadelphia Phillies. And a big trade went down over the past week, and that's between the Oakland A's and the Chicago Cubs, as Jeff Samardzija is the prize piece of that trade, going from the Cubs to the A's. And in return, they get a prize prospect. His name's Addison Russell, the fifth highest-rated prospect according to ESPN, a top-notch young shortstop that the Cubs get in return. What does this do, though, for the Philadelphia Phillies? A lot of people say, well, what's it got to do with them? But I think it can push the market in a certain direction for the pitchers the Phillies have.
Absolutely. First off, I just want to say the Cubs are doing this the right way. They are rebuilding with position players, and they have an incredible stock of position players, especially after this trade, bringing in not just Addison Russell, who you mentioned, but also Billy McKinney, a left-handed hitting outfielder from the A's organization. I have a series of articles this week at csnphilly.com looking at the packages of prospects the Phillies should target in trades for their talented veterans. I was assuming the Phillies could get maybe one of Russell or McKinney for a Cliff Lee, for a Cole Hamels if they shopped him. The fact that the Cubs were able to get both, that's incredible. And like you said, I think it does give the Phillies some leverage here heading into the trade deadline, and here's why. The Athletics were already the best team in the American League, and they just got better with two starting pitchers in Jeff Samardzija and Jason Hamill. That's going to force the Angels and Mariners, who currently occupy the wild card spots, and also those American League East teams, the Orioles, the Blue Jays, the Yankees, it's going to force them to augment their rosters a little bit too. They need some top-end pitching, so I think it adds some leverage for the Phillies and maybe enhance the type of return the Phillies get.
All right, well, let's talk about the return that the Phillies could get. Obviously, Cliff Lee, if healthy, he'll draw a good return, and Cole Hamels, although he's stated that he doesn't want to go anywhere, and I'm sure the Phillies are reluctant to trade him, still, they're going to have to look into some of those things because they are going to be able to get them something in return. So how about with Lee? How about with Hamels? Let's look at some of the teams around Major League Baseball. You've got a few teams in the American League East that could use some pitching, be it the Yankees, the Orioles, even the Toronto Blue Jays. Who are you looking at?
I look at the Orioles. They have 4 different prospects I'd be interested in. If the Phillies want to opt for Major League readiness, which it seems that they want to do, Kevin Gausman is the guy that I would need if I'm the Phillies. Kevin Gausman is a guy who's made a handful of Major League starts. He has a 3.41 career ERA in the minors, just 23 years old, the 4th overall pick in 2012. Jonathan Scope is a middle infielder for the Orioles. Plays some second base, plays some third base. He's not a world beater, he's not a difference maker, but he's definitely better than what the Phillies have gotten in the past few years out of that utility infield position, and he actually has some pop. He's a guy who could play second or third for you long term. However, if the Phillies do opt for pure upside, the Orioles have 2 guys in Dylan Bundy and Hunter Harvey in the lower levels of the minors, absolutely dominating. The thing is, though, you need to get both of them if you're trading Cliff Lee, because it costs a lot to get an ace. And if you're trading for both Bundy and Harvey, you're giving yourself some confidence that one of them will pan out.
All right, and another team that the Phillies need to be looking out at is the Toronto Blue Jays, who they're in it now. They're in it to win it right now, and the American League East is definitely up for grabs. And 2 guys that stand out in their organization, one we've seen at the Major League level so far this season, is Marcus Stroman. Some of his numbers, a 3.44 ERA in just under 50 Major League innings. He's a 23-year-old right-hander. I don't know if he's a top-of-the-rotation kind of guy, but He's definitely up there. He could be a middle of the rotation type of pitcher. Another guy is Aaron Sanchez. He's 22, a righty, was a first rounder back in 2010, and through 350 minor league innings, a 3.51 ERA. So those are the two guys that they're going to have to look at if they want to go to Toronto. One more team is the New York Yankees.
Right.
Always involved when it comes to these guys.
With the Yankees, they did trade for Brandon McCarthy over the weekend. He's a number 5 starter. They still need top end of the rotation stuff, especially with CC Sabathia likely out for the season. I wrote an article a few weeks back at csnphilly.com looking at the guys from the Yankees. First off, Dellin Betances is where it has to start.
He's an all-star now.
He's an all-star, as we said he should be a couple weeks ago on the show. Elite season from a reliever. He's on pace for 147 strikeouts in 94 innings. That just talks about the kind of stuff he has. And he's a guy who can be a setup man. He can be a closer. You can maybe even try to bring him back to being a starting pitcher as he was in the minor leagues for the Yankees. Philly should also be targeting Luis Severino, a 20-year-old who's really just burst on the scene for the Yankees this year, emerged as their top starting pitching prospect. Third guy is catcher Gary Sanchez.
We talked about him a few weeks ago.
If I'm the Phillies, I look at him as catching depth in case Tommy Joseph does not pan out, in case Cameron Rupp doesn't pan out. So there's going to be no shortage of suitors, especially in that American League East for the Phillies. We haven't even mentioned the NL contenders, so it's going to be a wild month of July.
I think we're probably going to do that coming up in some later episodes.
I think we will.
But keep an eye on some of the guys that we just talked about here, especially in the American League East. From there, how about we talk about something that's happening at present, and that is Chase Utley is an all-star once again. He's a 6-time selection. And he and Yadier Molina, both 6-time selections. They have the most all-star selections for the NL team. So, again, another good season. It started off a lot better for Chase Utley, but definitely deserving. He was voted in by the fans. And it's the first time, though, that the Phillies have had just one all-star representative in a season since 2003, when it was just Randy Wolf. So you know the Phillies have fallen on hard times. Do you think they only deserved one in the all-star game?
It's hard to give a team that was 14 games under 500 at the time of the choosing more than one all-star. Jonathan Papelbon was certainly worthy, but so is Houston Street. He didn't make it with an even lower ERA and better save rate. So, you know, Chase Utley was the only guy who made it, and really, over his last 28 games, his last 30 games, hitting .214 with 2 extra base hits. So he's in a bit of a slump here, not a bit of a slump, he's in a prolonged slump, and that's one of the reasons the Phillies have gone cold offensively.
Well, your guy, Marlon Byrd, has had a pretty decent season in the outfield. He drew some consideration, although you have Giancarlo Stanton is a backup outfielder for the National League. Charlie Blackmon is another one, so tough to fit him in there, but he deserved a little bit of recognition.
I'd say Marlon Byrd is he keeps doing what he's doing, which is bashing the ball. I mean, there's no singles, it's all extra base hits. Hit a couple more home runs over the weekend. 18 homers, tied for second in the NL through Sunday. I think he's either second or third now among NL outfielders in extra base hits. He's having a productive year.
So a decent season for Chase Utley, once again an all-star. When we come back here on Phillies Nation, Jason Stark will join us and talk a little bit more about pitching and one of the guys that we just spoke about, Cliff Lee, and what could happen with him. We're coming right back. Don't go anywhere. It's Phillies Nation. Pat Gallen here with you on Phillies Nation, and joining us right now is the author of this book. It's called Wild Pitches from ESPN.com. It's the one and only Jason Stark joining us. Jason, we appreciate the time. Thanks.
What's up, guys? How are you?
We're doing pretty well. One guy that we've kind of lost sight of is Roy Halladay, and I know he hasn't pitched here in a little while, but I think that he still plays a role in the fact that the Phillies don't really have great talent and a lot of depth at starting pitching right now.
It's almost been like an understated part of the Phillies' demise these last few years has been Roy Halladay, that when the Phillies acquired him, they thought they were probably getting at least 3, as many as 5 great seasons out of Halladay. And it turned out that they only got 2 great seasons out of Halladay, and then an injury-plagued third year, and by that point it was over. And I get the feeling that if Roy Halladay was on this team last season in 2013, when everything else went wrong, bullpen-wise, offensively, if the Phillies still had a core of Halladay, Lee, Hamels, they would still be a contending team. Your thoughts?
You know, Corey, that's a really great point. When people think back on that last game against the Cardinals, the division series in 2011, everybody thinks back on that Ryan Howard last swing of the game, and that really was when the window slammed shut. But it wasn't just Ryan Howard that they lost that night, because Roy Halladay was never the same. He emptied the tank and he could never refill it. Came in the next spring, he wasn't right, he was never right again. And I completely agree with you. If you think back on that 2011 season and what made them so special, so dominating, was even on the nights they didn't score, they still won. Their record when they scored 3 runs or fewer that season was incredible, right? When they scored 4 runs, they were unbeatable. And look at this team. Look at the team of the last 2 years. This team has not been able to score runs. How do you cover that up? You cover it up with great, dominating pitching. If you'd had a healthy Halladay, if you'd had a healthy Lee, he'd had a healthy Hamels. You never know what might have been possible, and really, we never will know.
I guess that's like the inherent risk of spending so much money on starting pitching.
And one thing I always say to people is that you took for granted the 102-win season and how great the pitching was at that time, because now you're looking at the alternative and it's not pretty.
Really?
And games are a lot longer, if you've noticed.
Yeah, those games were like remember there was like 3 or 4 games in the first half that went 3 hours that season? Because those guys just chewed through every lineup they faced. No more. And you're exactly right. When you talk about spending money, big money on starting pitching, you're often forgetting one thing. When people ask me, all right, who is most likely to get hurt? Which starting pitchers? My answer is always all of them. They all get hurt. 50% of all starting pitchers wind up on the DL every single year. And that takes a big toll on a lot of teams. It's taken its toll on the Phillies.
And there's an interesting question in that too. And could they or should they trade Cliff Lee because of what you just mentioned? He's injured right now at the elbow, and that could be a problem, I don't think long term, but you never know when it's going to want to creep back up for a pitcher. Does that make it even more important to try and get what they can for Cliff Lee?
Well, that answer was probably they should have traded him last winter or last July, but they didn't go that route. And now he's going to be a very difficult guy to trade in July. Now, maybe not necessarily in December if they eat enough money, because Cliff Lee is still a guy that other teams love. But to trade him now and just say you did, I don't see the point in that. It's only worth trading him if you get something significant that you can start to rebuild around.
The book is called Wild Pitches. Go out, do yourself a favor, and get this. Some great stories in there. A lot of great Phillies stories as well. Jason, great stuff. We appreciate the time.
Thanks for inviting me, man.
Always fantastic getting a chance to catch up with the one and only Jason Stark of ESPN.com. Now we go to a segment called By the Numbers. It's brought to you by BQ Basement Systems, and a couple of non-Phillies related stats that stand out. Mike Hessman, maybe you've heard of him. He had a cup of coffee with the Tigers as a first baseman, a third baseman. He hit his 259th career International League home run on Monday night. He's 36 years old. He's got 404 career minor league home runs. 294 have come at the AAA level. That's insane.
One thing I remember about Mike Hessman is that a couple of years ago at Citi Field, it was Cole Hamels versus R.A. Dickey, a 1-0 game. I think R.A. Dickey hit the Phillies that day, and Mike Hessman provided the only run.
How about that? That's knowledge out of you. How about the rest of our By the Numbers pertaining to the All-Star game? 25 first-time All-Stars. We've got 11 in the National League this year, 14 in the American League. That could change. It could go up with people being replaced. But over the last 10 years, actually last season, had the most first-timers. 39 first-time All-Stars last season, only 25 so far this year. One of those first-time All-Stars, you remember him well, Brandon Moss. How could you not? He's going to the All-Star game, and since the All-Star break in 2013, only Miguel Cabrera has more RBIs. 110 for Miguel, 105 for Brandon Moss. That's insane. And only Edwin Encarnacion and Giancarlo Stanton have more home runs in that time.
Well, it just speaks to the lineup that Brandon Moss plays in right now, and the fact that he's become literally the centerpiece of the best offense in baseball, which is kind of crazy to say, huh? But my two By the Numbers, I have two Phillies-related ones, and neither of them are very happy, optimistic stats. One of them is that over their last 15 games, the Phillies' batting average with runners in scoring position. Take a guess.
It's very low.
148. 148 the Phillies are hitting with runners in scoring position over their last 15 games. Their average per game is 1 for 7.2 with runners in scoring position.
It's not going to get it
Against
done.
the Pirates over the weekend, the Phillies went 2 for 9 with runners in scoring position. So I looked at it, 9 at-bats in a 3-game series. Seems crazy low.
Yeah, it's really low.
In terms of opportunities, the fewest opportunities with runners in scoring position the Phillies have had in their last 68 series of 3 or more games. So they're not even getting the opportunity to drive guys in anymore. It's gotten pretty bad.
That's pretty bad. It's really low. Let's go to fantasy baseball, which is much better. It's, of course, brought to you by DraftStreet.com. It is the future of fantasy sports. They've got free one-day leagues where you can win cash prizes. Go back to last week. You had Jake McGee.
I did, and Jake McGee, while he didn't get every save opportunity for the Rays, did pitch 2 1/3 scoreless innings with 1 save.
I went with Cole Calhoun. Finally, I got someone that did well last week. A pretty decent week for him. Went 6 for 8 on Saturday and Sunday against the Houston Astros. So I hope he picked him up. I had him. Of course, he was on my bench. How about this week?
I've got Wilson Ramos, the Nationals catcher. He's hit .369 over his last 17 games with an OPS close to 1,000. That Nationals offense is red hot right now, one of the top offenses in all of baseball, and he's batting 6th or 7th for those Nats, so I would pick him up. He's owned in just 44% of Yahoo leagues.
All right, I'm not going with a guy on waivers. I'm going with a guy that you need to trade for right now before he comes back from the disabled list. You might be able to get him on the cheap. Carlos Gonzalez from the Colorado Rockies went down with that finger injury a few weeks back. He's ready to rock. He could be back by Friday. Try and pry him from some unsuspecting owner. He might be able to get away with it. That's it for our fantasy baseball segment. It's, of course, brought to you by DraftStreet.com, the future of fantasy sports. Use the promo code Phillies Nation. Sign up for free one-day fantasy leagues. We're coming right back with All-Star Snubs. It's Corey and Pat here on Phillies Nation.
Welcome back to Phillies Nation. I'm Ryan Williams here with Pat and Corey, and it's time for our Batter's Inbox questions, where the guys debate your question and I'll pick the winner. Ready?
Let's go. Let's do it.
All right, our first question. If the Phillies were to trade Dominic Brown for a change of scenery, what would be the best spot? Pat?
I think the Seattle Mariners would be an interesting situation, and the trade could be Dominic Brown and maybe a prospect for Dustin Ackley. Remember him? He was the number 2 overall pick in the 2009 draft, and he's fallen on some hard times as well out there in Seattle. Now, he's a better defender, and he's not as he's a bit more polished offensively. He doesn't have as much power as Dominic Brown, but he's only hitting .227 with 4 home runs this year. I know that Safeco is a spacious ballpark. He's had some trouble out there, as a lot of Mariners had over the past few seasons. But if Dominic Brown goes out there, obviously the power would be a concern, and it wouldn't be a straight-up one-for-one deal. But he's a guy to look out for because the Mariners, supposedly they wanted to try and trade him to Houston. I mean, who knows? He could be a definite trade candidate, and I think they could pair up there.
Dustin Ackley to me is a very blah player. If I'm trading Dominic Brown at his lowest point, I want a guy who has a bit more upside. And that's why I look at Jackie Bradley Jr. of the Red Sox. Look at these numbers. Neither of Dominic Brown and Jackie Bradley Jr. have done anything to warrant playing time in either of their cities, despite the short duration of their careers. Jackie Bradley Jr. just a .210 batting average in 2 seasons with the Red Sox. What sticks out, though, is the defense. Jackie Bradley Jr. can play center field. He's saved 9 runs on defense. Dominic Brown has cost the Phillies 44 runs in his career on defense. So if I'm doing a change of scenery candidate there, I'd target Jackie Bradley Jr. The Phillies could use the center field help.
Not bad, not bad.
I like Corey's answer.
Thank you.
All right, fine.
I
Sorry,
like my
Pat.
answer.
That's all right. That's okay. I think they're both pretty good, though.
I do, but he beat you on that
All
one.
right.
Our next question. The All-Star teams were announced over the weekend. Who are the biggest snubs in each league? Corey?
I have Henderson Alvarez in the National League because over his last 9 starts, he has a 1.04 ERA. This guy the Phillies have seen a couple times this year, and he's dominated them. I have Corey Kluber out in the American League because he's in the top 5 in the AL in innings and in strikeouts, and he may never have another opportunity to make an All-Star team. To me, that was a huge snub. I don't see how a guy like Corey Kluber didn't make it. I don't see how a guy like Henderson Alvarez didn't make it, especially when you consider that they're not household name perennial All-Stars who are going to be in the conversation every year.
2 absolutely ridiculous names in the American League that did not make it. One being Ian Kinsler. I understand it's a numbers game out there. A lot of good players in the American League at that position. But he's 3rd in all of baseball for position players at WAR. That's ridiculous that he doesn't make it. And what a trade, though, between the Texas Rangers and the Detroit Tigers. Prince Fielder goes down for the season. Ian Kinsler, a possible All-Star. He still could make it. Another guy. He could be the Cy Young winner in the American League. That's Chris Sale. He's 8-1. I know he was injured for a little bit, but through 13 games, he's got a .212 ERA. He struck out 12 Mariners the other day. This guy should absolutely be an All-Star. Again, he might be in it. He might be soon, but initially he wasn't.
Pat did his homework on this question.
He did. You know, I'll give the point.
All right.
All right,
Nice.
here we
Thanks,
go. Our last question. Who is the most undeserving All-Star selection? Corey?
I'm going to go the most undeserving All-Star selection is Matt Carpenter of the St. Louis Cardinals. I think he's living based on last year's reputation. He has not been the same player by a large margin. Same batting average through Sunday as Anthony Rendon, who I would have selected for the team over him. Rendon also plays multiple positions. Rendon with about a 60-point higher OPS, more power, more speed, every facet of the game. I think Rendon over Carpenter should have been a selection.
I'm going to go with some middle relievers in the National League. It's nice to see these guys make the All-Star team, but really, did they need to be there? Pat Neshek and Tony Watson. I'd rather see guys like Steven Strasburg or Hyun-Jin Ryu than these middle relief pitchers. Again, it's nice, it's fine, but wouldn't you rather see Steven Strasburg, who leads the National League in strikeouts in the All-Star game, than a couple of guys who pitch occasionally? I don't know. It's the middle relief guys. It kind of bothers me.
You did good this week.
I did?
I think you're going to win.
Winner.
Sorry.
So we're tied on the year now?
I think so.
All right, that works for me.
Good job, Pat.
All right.
Way to get back in the race.
I'm in.
Well, that wraps up our Batter's Inbox questions for this week. We want to hear what you have to say, so leave them for us on our Facebook and Twitter page. Don't touch that remote. More Phillies news is coming right up.
Hi, I'm Tommy Green. Today we're going to talk about wild pitches. in particularly 93, I led the National League in wild pitches. And the question was raised to me, why? Why does that happen? And to me, a couple of them just got away from me. Fastballs that, the heat, just, you sweat a lot. Sometimes that happens. The ball slips a little bit, ball rides up there. And I was a high fastball guy a lot of times too. Other than that, we never want to get hurt hanging a breaking ball. We try not to get hurt. So our theory, we expand the zone as a pitcher. So when we go to throw a breaking ball, 0-2, 1-2, 2-2, whatever, in particular probably 1-2, I don't want it hanging. So I'm trying to bury it, make it look like a strike. You expand the zone, and sometimes you pull it down in the dirt, and that's what happens. It gets away a little bit further outside than you want it to, and it hits the dirt and gets by the catcher. It's a tough play for a catcher to do. So that's probably why I did it. I threw some breaking ball. I didn't get hurt as much with the breaking ball down in the dirt. They can't hit that. So I hope this helps, answers the question. Hope this helps you out a little bit.
All right, well, the biggest thing that I noticed, the difference between aluminum and is wood, is one, just the way the ball jumps off the bat. Not necessarily goes that extra distance with aluminum, but it's the initial contact of the ball going past the pitcher is probably half the time quicker than it is with an aluminum bat. The thing about a wood bat is you have to have one sweet spot on the bat, which is normally about 2 inches from the top. This is the sweet spot. Aluminum, you can hit a ball down in here and still drive it out of the ballpark because it's not going to break. Now, the biggest adjustment I had when I went from aluminum bat to wooden bat was the weight. A wooden bat, you're usually about 3 or 4 points difference. So if you're going 34, you're going to 29-ounce bat. Now with aluminum, when I was swinging a bat when I was younger, I was probably about a 34-inch, 33, 34-inch ounce bat as well. So that's the biggest thing, is the balance and just the aluminum bat, you can stay back a little longer, not worry about getting jammed, ball drive out of the ballpark, where aluminum wood bat, you really have to concentrate on getting the barrel to the ball and hitting off the sweet spot.
Thank you, Tommy. Thank you, Matt. Some great pitching and hitting tips there. Before we get to our Twitter trivia, let's talk about things that we need to be watching for, because I know the Phillies have been tough to watch recently. What stands out to me is Ken Giles. Obviously, he's been outstanding so far here in his young Major League career. First 10 games, 16 strikeouts, 3 walks, 1 run. That's important. He could be the future closer here on this team.
And he might be the closer moving forward if Jonathan Papelbon is moved before the deadline. I look at Cody Ashley, not so much the results, but the process. He showed a lot of loft on his swing. Homer in Pittsburgh, a pretty impressive home run. And Darren Ruff's going to be back for the second half as well. So those are a couple reasons to watch.
Let's go to our Twitter trivia. It's brought to you by Shibe Vintage Sports. You can check out their Phillies gear at shibesports.com and use the code PhilliesNation. You can save 20%. Not bad. So last week's question, Grady Sizemore went for 30 homers, 30 steals, 90 walks in 2008. Since that time, only one other player had done that, 30 and 30 with 90 walks. Can you name him?
Well, I know now it's Hanley Ramirez. I did not know that before because I can't imagine him in his current state stealing 30 bases, but
absolutely. Did it back in 08, 33 homers, 35 steals, 92 walks. This week's Twitter trivia question, use the hashtag PNTrivia. It is, and with Clayton Kershaw's impressive scoreless streak in mind, since 2004, which Phillies pitcher has had the longest streak of innings pitched without allowing a run? Can you name him?
Hamels?
No.
Lee?
Nope.
Halladay?
Nope.
Well, then I have no idea. I'm stumped.
All right, well, you've got to get the answer to us at Phillies Nation on Twitter. Use the hashtag PNTrivia. The thank yous go all around to Tommy Green and Matt Stairs, to Ryan Williams, the guys behind the camera at 2020, and Brian Michael as well, for our friends at BQ Basement Systems and Fieldhouse Beer and Sports Hall. $3 beers during Phillies games. Come on out.
It's a good deal.
He's Corey. I'm Pat. We'll talk to you later here on Phillies Nation.